What is going on, my fellow movie nerds and geeks alike? Today we'll be talking about my favorite physical media releases of 2024.
I'm having a good time. Not.
There's gonna be a ton of these videos hitting YouTube, I'm sure.
Bruh.
But the beauty of all the videos is that everyone's taste is different, so everyone's gonna have different choices. Give or take a few that I'm sure are gonna be on almost everyone's list, but it's gonna be a fun time. There's been a lot of great releases this year. Strap in and let's get into my list. Now, before I dive into what my actual favorite releases of the year are, I wanted to just go through some honorable mentions that I really liked, but for some reason or other are just not going to make my list of 10 favorites. First on my honorable mentions list is Lamberto Bava's Delirium, Photos of Gloria, even though it says Joya there. But the reason I put this on my honorable mentions, because although this is a great release, it already had a Blu-ray release from like Code Red, I think, years back. Granted, this got upgraded thanks to Vinegar Syndrome to a beautiful 4K, and you know Vicky and I love our 80s, 70s, 60s Giallo movies, and I loved this movie, I loved this release. But because it already had a Blu-ray and, you know, this is just essentially an upgrade, granted it was a great upgrade, it ends on my honorable mention list. And second on my honorable mentions list is Arrow Video's 4K release of the Friday the 13th remake from 2009. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably have a bunch of releases of this movie already on like standard DVD, standard Blu-ray, you have it in the Scream Factory set. So I was kind of trepidatious to even buy this one, but I had seen a couple reviews saying like, no, for real, this looks amazing. And after getting it and watching it, I have to agree. Whatever they did to restore this movie, even though it's pretty new, it is fantastic looking. It is visually stunning somehow. Like the greens are just like exploding out of the screen. All the blood is just shiny and amazing. But the reason I'm not, you know, gonna add it to my top 10 is because this movie already exists in so many other fashions. And another on my honorable mentions list goes to 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street, which finally got bumped up to 4K this year. Now, this one is the UK super limited edition that comes with like the Steelbook that's got like the original artwork on it and all that. Now, this is an incredible release, and the reason it's on my honorable mentions list is because this movie already exists in so many other facets, so it's not like it, you know, came out of nowhere. But I loved the transfer. The reds are insane, the greens are insane, and they finally fixed the audio issues that were plaguing all the other releases. And next on my honorable mentions list, I'm going to lump these two together. We have High Tension and Inside from Second Sight Films. I'd also include that movie Frontiers on here. Now, these are amazing, amazing upgrades from DVD, for me anyway. High Tension got the 4K treatment. Inside just got bumped up to Blu-ray. I love these movies. It's part of that like French extreme era of filmmaking that was going on in like the mid-2000s. The reason these are only on my honorable mentions list, though, is because the films tend to look a little darker than the DVD did. Granted, that's what the filmmakers wanted, so that's why they look that way. But I knocked them down a peg because they, for some reason, did not include the dubbed version. Even though, like, the Blu-rays and DVDs all had a dub. You know, we just watch it with the subtitles. No big deal. But sometimes, you know, you just want to throw a movie on and kind of, like, veg out or just, like, melt into the couch and, you know, try not to pay as much attention as you need to if you're reading subtitles. Now that the honorable mentions are out of the way, let's get into my 10 favorite releases of the year. These are in no particular order. They're just kind of 10 movies that I loved the release of this year. First up is MVD's 4K of Ghoulies 2. Now, last year I think I put the original Ghoulies on my list because I can't believe this movie got this kind of treatment. This movie, included just like the first one, has no business looking this great. I love the Ghoulies movies, and I think Ghoulies 2 is probably my all-time favorite of the bunch. This is another fantastic release. Like, why does this look so good? Granted, when movies look this good, sometimes you notice like how shoddy some of the special effects were. Like sometimes you could really tell that these are puppets, but man, I love this movie, and the fact that this got some crazy boutique-y kind of release is, fuck, I'm all for it. It has no business looking this good. It just doesn't, and that's why it's on my list. A new boutique label showed up this year named Celluloid Dreams, and they have been kind of diving into the world of 70s Italian giallo films, which, you know us, we love them. This one is The Case of the Bloody Iris, starring the always lovely Edwige Fenech.
Yeah, baby, yeah!
And George Hilton, of course. This movie is one of my favorite giallo films I've ever watched. It involves, like, these two women that move into this apartment complex. Little do they know that there is a slashing killer amongst them in the apartment building, and Edwige Fenech used to be a part of like this sex cult against her will. There's just so many things happening, but this release is on my top 10 because this movie got such a crazy restoration. The first time we watched it was on, I think Shudder had a list of giallo films, and you could really see like the grit, grain, and like just colors just kind of like not matching whatsoever. But Celluloid Dreams cleaned up the film so great with this release. Now there's lots of special features on here, commentaries, all the likes of it, and I can't wait to see what Celluloid Dreams has coming down the pipeline. I know they have like Short Night of Glass Dolls and then Black Belly of the Tarantula coming, and if there is even half as good as Case of the Bloody Iris is, it's going to end up on my list next year. And next up on my list is just a standard studio title. This is Brian De Palma's Body Double that was released by Sony Pictures, and this is on like a Steelbook. I've got it in this little case here. And the reason this one made my list is because Body Double has never had like a great American release. I think Indicator did like a Blu-ray a couple years back, but if you aren't region free, like, you know, you can't watch it. So, well, thankfully this year we got this awesome Steelbook with this amazing movie Body Double on 4K. Vicky and I really fell in love with Brian De Palma's films over this past year. This one is no different. It's another LA 80s thriller. There's a killer on the loose, and God, this movie is just great. Probably, honestly, one of Brian De Palma's best, but really showcasing his style here, and the transfer on this is incredible. There's not a lot of special features on this disc, but really, this one is on my list just because it finally got a release. And next up, from Severin Films, we got the 4K release of Dario Argento's Opera. Now, I struggled with putting this on my list because of, like, you know, the whole disc replacement thing that happened where the color timing was off. This release really is stunning, though, man. It's like 5 discs. They've got the soundtrack on here. You have like a bunch of different cuts of the film. You have the film on 4K. Enough fucking bonus features to keep you busy for like a week. It's insane. And granted, you know, the whole disc replacement thing happened, but you didn't have to do anything. Severin sent it to you, and when it got here, guess what? The film looks glorious. This release is an all-timer, and I'm just so happy that Severin finally got their hands on something that, like, you know, people would be clamoring for. It sucks for them that, like, the disc was messed up, but, like, hey, they righted the wrongs. The movie looks fantastic. Anything you could possibly want about Opera is on this disc. You even get a booklet. I mean, it's just incredible. They corrected the like aspect ratio of this film. They went to town on restoring all the film elements. There's like not a scratch on this film. It is just beautiful, and this release is packed to the gills with everything you could ever possibly want to know about the film, including the fucking soundtrack. What more could you want? And next up on my list is Arrow Films' release of Demolition Man. Now, Arrow always does a great job. This year was probably one of their best ever, but the reason this one made my list is because I've always loved Demolition Man. It is just like one of those like schlocky 90s ridiculous action stories. Like, I love like post-apocalyptic type shit, and this is like kind of like the world in the future, but like it's made almost like the opposite. Like everything is almost too shiny, too nice, too glitzy, and like there's no bad words to be uttered, there's no violence, and this just like ups the camp to 1,000. Stallone is at his all-time best. Wesley Snipes is one of the most iconic fucking action villains of all time in this movie, and you also have like Sandra Bullock in here saying some of the funniest, most ridiculous one-liners you'll ever hear in a movie.
You really licked his ass.
And not to mention, like, you get all the bells and whistles of all like the special features in here. You also get like the international version, which changes all the Taco Bells into Pizza Hut, because in Europe there was no Taco Bells, so they changed everything to Pizza Hut. And granted, like, you don't need that shit, but the fact that they included it on here just makes this an all-time release for me. It's filled with everything you'd want to know about a movie that I just grew up loving, seeing this in the theater growing up, and then just watching it over and over again. It's never looked better. And yeah, Demolition Man from Arrow Video. If it has the Arrow Video logo on it, you just know you're in for a good time, and you know they're going to do a stellar job, and that was no different with Demolition Man. And next on my list is another one from Arrow Video called the Mexico Trilogy. Now, these are obviously the 3 Mexico films from Robert Rodriguez. You got El Mariachi, you got Desperado, and you've got Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Granted, these movies have all had like a singular Blu-ray release or DVD release in the past, but having them all together in a box set with all the bells and whistles, as Arrow always does, the countless special features, every single movie has a poster. Desperado is on 4K and never looking better. I just like that it comes in this box set. Granted, El Mariachi and Once Upon a Time in Mexico are only the Blu-rays, which is kind of like a bummer. Like, why not just put them all in 4K? But I've always loved all these movies. I always have loved Robert Rodriguez's work. I mean, from like The Faculty all the way up to From Dusk Till Dawn. But these movies are like definitely his passion projects, and you can really see it. They carry that story of like the mariachi, who is secretly like this crazy assassin. It's just fantastic. I love all the movies, and this release couldn't have been better. Maybe if they were put on 4K, but at least Desperado gets the 4K treatment. But I love when things are all housed together nicely in this package like this. And dude, like, that's why this made my list, is because having all these movies finally get a special treatment. I grew up watching Desperado, so to have all the movies surrounding that same storyline in one box, it's gonna make my list, man. The Houses of Doom from Cauldron Films has made my list of the best releases of the year. These are 2 films by Lucio Fulci and Umberto Lenzi, made for Italian television, but for some reason never saw the light of day. Well, not for no reason. They're gory as fuck, there's nudity, they're kind of insane. We've got like the House of Clocks in here, the Sweet House of Horrors, the House of Witchcraft, and the House of Lost Souls. None of these have seen the light of day, I think, since DVD. I think a couple of them weren't even on DVD, so Cauldron Films took the time to restore all these movies, put them all on these discs, and put them in this glorious box set. Now, say what you will about the films, they're not the best. Granted, they were made on shoestring budgets for Italian television, and it shows. Like, there's one film in here called the Sweet House of Horrors that I outright despised. But the fact that these movies all got a release and are out of obscurity, are now housed in this beautiful box set, it had to make my list, man. Seeing Fulci films I've never seen before, I always am up for that, and Umberto Lenzi is slowly becoming like one of my favorite Italian directors, with all his work in like the Italian splatter zombie movies he did, or his giallo stuff. Thank you, Cauldron Films, for this beautiful box set filled with lots of special features and all these movies for the first time on high definition. Michael Mann's The Keep from Vinegar Syndrome. Now, this one is still being talked about because it's still relatively new. This sold out in like less than 48 hours on Vinegar Syndrome's website. This movie has been talked about for years. This thing hasn't seen the light of day since fucking VHS, dude. Michael Mann himself despises the movie. He says it just doesn't make sense. The studio chopped it to shit. I think the only way you could even get this on DVD was if you ordered it from Australia. But yeah, dude, The Keep on 4K. Of course it was going to sell out. People have been talking about this for years, and this made my list because of that. This movie has never had a release, dude, and the extensive restoration work they put into this is insane. Like, this movie looks great. Granted, I really wish we got Michael Mann's director's cut that he's talked about for ages, but the fact that we get it at all, it had to make my list. And in this awesome, like, cool Slipcase box thing that Vinegar Syndrome did, you also get the movie in like another Slipcase. You've got a huge booklet with writings on all the film. Of course this is going to make anyone's list because it's never seen the light of day. Now, you could say what you will about the movie. It really doesn't make any fucking sense at all because they cut half of it out of the fucking movie. But it is a visual spectacle. The soundtrack by Tangerine Dream is amazing. You know, the movie is what it is. It is just kind of puts you in this weird dreamlike state. But dude, this movie's never been released since VHS. Of course it's gonna make a fucking top 10 physical releases of the year. Synapse and Red Shirt Pictures release of Trick or Treat, the 1986 hair metal rocker fucking horror movie, man, with the soundtrack by Fastway that will get stuck in your head as soon as you hear it. This is an all-time amazing schlocky 80s fucking movie that cannot be missed. Thank you to Michael Felsher, aka Slippy, as he's been known on the YouTube world thanks to Dead Pit. This movie finally has a 4K restoration, and it looks beautiful. It has the fucking soundtrack on here. It has a poster. It's got a booklet. It's got more fucking special features than you could ever want, man. It's incredible. They really knocked it out of the park with this, and Michael Felsher thankfully now has his own like label under Red Shirt Pictures that he's been releasing under Synapse. And I mean, if this is what he's releasing, these huge boxes with all the fucking fixins you could ever want, he's gonna be a fucking all-timer release every time he releases stuff. But like The Keep, this was a movie that people have wanted for decades. Like, it just has looked like shit on DVD or VHS forever. So he took the time and remastered it top to bottom. It's never looked better. And I mean, dude, Sammy Kerr in fucking 4K. We've been wanting this forever. It finally got released this year. I mean, this is also another one of those releases that was first brought up like 2 years ago. So people, of course, when it got released, boom, it sold out like fucking in hours, dude. Of course. This is a no-brainer to make the list. People have wanted this for years. It's one I loved when I was a kid, and I will continue to go on loving it, and I thankfully have an awesome release thanks to Synapse and Michael Felsher. I said there wasn't going to be any particular order, but there is one that stood head and shoulders above the rest for me this year, and that is Second Sight's release of The Hitcher. Look at this thing. This has more shit than I could ever know what to do with, man. You got a hardcover book in here. You've got like the screenplay in here. You have the movie on 4K after years and years of them talking about it. You get the art cards that, honestly, I don't give a shit about. I don't think anyone cares about the art cards. But this thing is incredible. The amount of special features that I could never watch in days, in weeks, housed in this amazing box set. I have loved The Hitcher since I was a child. I was a child of HBO, and The Hitcher is owned by HBO. It was always on HBO, so I always found myself watching it. In fact, when I was a kid, seeing Rutger Hauer as the hitchhiker in this movie, I went out and saw Blade Runner for the first time thanks to this movie. I went out and watched countless other movies he was in, like Split Second. But God, Second Sight knocked this out of the park. This thing only had like a snapper case DVD up until this time. I even still have like my old Hitcher VHS clamshell back here. That was the only way I owned this fucking movie until this came out. But this has been talked about for years, and honestly, it was so worth the wait. The way this movie looks on 4K is unbelievable, like, and it is just grandiose. The desert sequences look amazing in this. Yeah, this is my number one release of the year. I think it's going to be a lot of people's number one release of the year. Maybe like Trick or Treat or The Keep will make number one for other people, but this is a no-brainer for me because I've loved this movie since I was a kid, and I've been waiting years for this. This has never been better. This is the definitive edition of this film. You will never get anything better than this. That's my list of my favorite releases of the year. I'd be remiss not to mention a few that I'm sure are going to be on a couple other people's lists that I personally didn't pick up for whatever reason or another, but they're great releases and I just wanted to mention them here. There's that Columbia release of like the Frank Capra movies that's got like this huge opening like cinematic drawer or whatever the hell it is, and there's just so many movies in it. That thing looks beautiful, looks amazing. But for me, I never really cared for any of those kinds of movies, so I wouldn't pick it up. You also have Umbrella's release of the Super Mario Brothers movie in that huge box set. I never really cared for the movie. I thought it was fine. Like, I thought it was schlocky and goofy, but there's no denying how incredible that huge box set they released is. There's also Arrow's release of the Coffin Joe box set. Those are movies I never got into. I've maybe seen pieces of some of those movies, and they just weren't for me. I think recently there was the Universal Alfred Hitchcock box set that comes in this like giant book thing, and they also released the Universal Monsters of the same thing. Like, it's a huge book that realistically wouldn't fit on any normal shelf. They're kind of reminiscent of that old Criterion like Godzilla book they did back in the day. So for me, that big book that doesn't fit anywhere is just not for me, dude. I wouldn't know what to do with that damn thing. It would just end up collecting dust on a coffee table or something. But there's no denying it's beautiful. And if you really love those movies, I understand why you would pick them up. And the last one I just at least wanted to mention is that new 4K release from Imprint Films of The Never-Ending Story. That big $200 thing that comes in the Never-Ending Story book that is in the movie. It's beautiful, dude. I'm not spending $200 for a big, giant, book like that wouldn't fit on any shelf anyway. Yeah, man, that release is beautiful. I just don't know what the fuck I would do with all those silly lobby cards and that giant book. So that was my list, and a bunch of other stuff that I just wanted to bring up, because I know everyone else is going to be talking about this stuff. I didn't pick up everything this year. I picked up stuff I cared about. That's the way I always have been. Let me know in the comments down below if I missed anything or didn't talk about something that maybe you think was the release of the year. I would love to know your opinion. And hell, maybe some of these releases you'd be like, why the fuck would you put Ghoulies 2 on your list? Dude, I love the movie, but let me know down below why you think it shouldn't be on my list. Until next time, guys, Vicky and I will see you very soon. Thank you for always watching our silly-ass videos, and we'll see you in the new year, my guys. Adios.